Hi everyone, just turned on live, so just give me a second to update the video live stream title and description, which I'll do in just a second. Here we go. Click on this. Here we go. So let me go back to YouTube. Go. So I just need to adjust the angle a bit. There we are. Okay. So lighting's not great, is it? But hopefully, I think it should be okay. I think it should be okay for what we're doing today. Take my top off here. I think what I'll do is actually just, let me see if I can plug in my light. Let's see if that helps matters a little bit. I think that helps a bit. Hi everyone, so thanks for those of you who've just joined me. So my plan today is I've got this watercolor marker line drawing of some belted Galloway cattle from up on Dartmoor. I'm going to get rid of this one here, this animal here. So it'll just be 1, 2, 3. And the idea is to make this almost semi-abstract in the sense that the animals will be fairly realistic, but the background will be just a stormy orange sky. And then I may well have the animals standing on a blue surface. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to be using interactive acrylics for this one. If you've got any questions at all, then just ask me in the live chat and I'll answer them as soon as I can in between painting. So this is mixed media paper today. The other day I was using watercolor paper and watercolor paints. So I'm going to begin by, I've got my Atelier interactive acrylics. So this is just tube orange. I'm just using a decorator's palette. So the idea at the beginning, this is brilliant magenta, is to just have a little bit of fun with the sky and experiment a little bit. I'm going to get titanium white, I think, for the sky with some stormy colors and see what happens. So I've got a bit of cobalt blue here that I'm putting down. And we'll also get some cerulean blue as well. going to be using just a flat synthetic brush to begin with. And I've got my water spray bottle here. So I'm just going to begin by putting a little spritz of water across the surface of the painting. And I'll also pop a bit of that onto the palette as well. It just helps to get the paint moving fairly quickly. So to begin with, I'm just going to pick up some of that orange. It's not a color I use straight out of the tube all that often. So we'll just blitz a bit of that in. Across the sky there. So one of the things I enjoy doing a lot is contrasting the background approach with the animal approach, in the sense that although I'm going to depict a sky, it's mostly from my imagination, and you know, certainly the colors will be not a color combo I've tried for a sky to my memory. Bright orange, and I'm going to mix some other stuff in there as well. But then the animals, in contrast to the sky, will hopefully be reasonably realistically depicted. I'm not going for photographic, but they'll hopefully look like belted Galloways. Get a bit more water on the surface. This interactive acrylic is really good because you can reactivate the paint by spraying water onto it, even when it's touch dry. Now this guy here, this belty, I've got to get rid of that as best I can. So I used watercolor marker, and I think this is Prussian blue watercolor marker. It probably looks almost like black on the page, but I don't think it is. I think it's Prussian blue. So if I work away at that with my brush, I can dissolve some of that, and that's given me a slightly sort of burnt orange look to the paper, to the paint. But we still haven't removed completely the outline of that animal. So what I'll have to do is come in with some more opaque paint later to deal with that. But that's not a big deal at all. Okay, so yeah, I quite like the look of the orange so far. But what I'm going to do next is just take a little bit of the magenta that I squeezed out a moment ago and mix that in to the orange I had left on the brush. And keep the surface of the painting nice and moist. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but my paper has started to buckle. But that's not a problem with this paper, with this mixed media paper. Once it dries out, I've got it taped down, but it is buckling quite a bit. Once it dries out, then it'll flatten out, no problem. So that's okay. So let's get a bit more magenta in there to that mix. And I'm deliberately changing the direction of my brush strokes for this new application of paint. So before I've gone for the most part top left to bottom right, but now I'm going in the opposite direction. And you can see by feathering just the tips of the brush across the surface of the paper, it leaves some lovely effects on the edge of the brush stroke. And similarly, the spraying the water onto the surface of the paint leaves little circles, which is a nice effect as well. Okay, so we'll grab a little bit more magenta, I think. We'll pop that in at the very top of the page. Okay, cool. And then let's keep the surface wet. Just feather a little bit of what's left on the brush into some of the other areas as well. Oh, that bit went down a little too heavily, but yeah, that's okay. That's working okay. All right, so while I've got that color on the brush, what I'm going to do next is just grab some titanium white and mix that into what's left on the brush. Because while I want the sky to be kind of dark and perhaps somewhat foreboding, I don't want it to be all one note. So we can perhaps roll the brush across the surface of the painting as well. And the acrylic's pretty good. It tends to dry fairly close to the color I'm putting down, but you can't always tell exactly what you've got until the paint is completely dry. Let's go through that bit of that wet area that I've got there. Okay, so I think I'm just going to clean this brush off a moment. And then what I'm going to do is take a similar approach, but I'm just going to pick up a bit of the pure orange that I started the painting with, then a good dollop of the titanium white, and just mixing those two together thoroughly. And then just keep the surface of the painting moist, partly to let the paint blend, but also, as I mentioned, I like so for example here, the little speckling effects that you get within the paint because of using the water spray bottle. That's really cool. So let's go the other way this time. Just going to clean this brush off again. And I'm going to leave that brush to soak just for a bit. Next, I'm going to, if I can find it, here we go. I'm going to just switch to this round brush, which comes to like a very nice fine point. And I'm just going to pick up some of the pure titanium white. And you can see I've kind of overloaded the brush so that it's sort of hanging off the end of the bristles there. And what we'll do, again, let's keep the surface is fairly wet already actually, but we'll just put a little bit of extra water on the paper there. And then just very lightly, we'll put in a few wisps of pure white. And for the most part, they won't remain pure white, especially as I start to run out of paint on the brush. And as I vary the pressure, some of that's going to mix in with the wet paint that's already down. We'll grab a little bit more. I'm not going to go overboard with this, but it's just nice to have a little pop of brightness. Could almost put some yellow in here actually, but we've gone with the white. So that's okay so far. I think I want to just soften, not much, but we'll go to this little frayed flat brush. And let's just soften that a touch. There we go. Let's make it look a little less like a line has been drawn across the page. But I'm fairly happy with that at the moment. So next move then is I need to get some color into the ground. So this is where, you know, the sky is somewhat abstract in terms of the source of color, but also the color for the ground is going to be somewhat unusual as well. So picking up some titanium white and some cerulean blue. So the first thing I want to do is see if I can cover up this animal here. And yeah, that works fairly well. So we will stick with that color for the moment. And I actually quite like, as I'm putting this color down, some of the sky colors kind of bleeding through the blue, but I actually quite like that effect. So the reason I chose the blue was it's complementary to the orange. So the idea is to have quite a striking contrast. And as I say, I've got a kind of almost an abstraction of a sky. It's from my imagination, certainly in terms of the color. The blue is obviously my interpretation of the ground, because generally speaking, belted Galloways are not standing on a blue surface. And then the colors I'm going to use for the cattle are going to be much more tertiary. So these are very strong secondaries for the most part. So there'll be three distinct regions of the painting, both in terms of what they are, sky, ground, and animal, but also in terms of the way they're painted. Just sprayed a little bit of water onto the paper just to keep the paint moving. And that's also allowing me to put down a slightly thinner layer of paint towards the bottom of the paper, just to give it a little bit of variation in tone. Okay, there we go. So the next thing I need to do is grab some Mars Black and a bit more of the titanium white. Wherever that's gone. There it is. And we're going to use that to mix up a mid-grey to begin with. So I'm going to use that mid-grey. So the flat brush, especially when the paint is fairly thick, it's actually quite good for getting into, well, as you'd expect, I suppose, into corners and things, but it's because you can use the corner of the brush. Even though it's a fairly big brush, you can get a surprisingly fine line and high level of detail. So the idea of the color I'm putting down at the moment is this particular animal's off in the distance. So the idea is that all three of these cattle are looking off to the left or away into the left. But the idea of the color I'm putting down now is it's going to be somewhat paler than the color that I use for the other two animals. And at the moment, I'm keeping my marker line visible. I may well obscure quite a bit of that in a bit, but yeah, as I say, this paler color is to help suggest some distance between us and this particular animal. There we go. So fairly content with that so far. Let's get a bit more black into the mixture. Where's my black gone? Let's squeeze a bit more out of the tube. It's a bit more like it. And while I'm putting this black in, I can kind of, because this animal's nearer, I can just make this outline a little fuzzy by deliberately going across the line, just to begin to suggest the fact that this animal's coated in hair. So now I will be adding some colors into the mix with this black. I mean, it's not a true black that I'm putting down here. It's just a dark, it's a very dark gray, but I will be coming back in and adding some colored highlights, but they will be quite subdued highlights for the most part. For the most part, I'll probably put a few licks of brighter color. Oh, hi, Kayla. Sorry to hear you had a bad day, but glad the painting is making you feel a bit better, hopefully. I'm trying to create an image here which is sort of almost dreamlike, in the sense that, if we have a dream, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, there's a little bit of reality in there usually, but things aren't quite as they normally are, and things are just a little off center. So that's the idea here of all the different colors that I'm putting down and placing these animals in an unusual situation. So yeah, if anybody else has further questions for the live stream, feel free to pop those in, and I'll answer as soon as I can in between brush strokes. So once we've got this other animal blocked in, I can start to refine things.
I need to get a bit of water onto the palette. But once I've finished blocking in this animal, then I'll take a little, well, I need to do the white stripes as well. And I'll have a little think about the best way to go in terms of refining the image. Okay, cool. So let's just clean my brush a little bit here. And I think what I'm going to do for the white stripe is the way I normally approach this, because although they are white, you know, it's rare that something's pure white. So because of the way I've drawn it, you see, this one's actually got a little bit of the sky on top of the stripe, and that would probably be the case in reality, or in this reality. Some of the orangey light reflected from the sky would be bouncing off of the top of the body there, and the white stripe would look a pale orange probably. So with that in mind, the blue ground, the light from the blue ground would bounce off the underbellies of these animals. So what I'm actually going to do is go back into the pale cerulean blue that I had, pick up a little bit of the pale grey that I was using before. So now I've got a bluey grey, and we will put some water on the surface of the painting again. And begin to colour in the white stripes. Oops. Then put some of that here as well. And then what I'll do is the top part will become a pale orange. And then what I'll do eventually is over the top of all of that, I will work in some highlights and so on. So let's now this color I'm using here is too close in color to the hide of the animal, so I need to add a bit more white. Yeah, I think that works fairly well. And in fact, what I can do is, while I've got that color on the brush,
can use that for a few highlights on the darker area as well. Could even argue that this animal is a dun belted Galloway. So, to the best of my knowledge, most belted Galloway cattle are the black and white variety. There's a rarer variation, which is deep reddish brown and white. And then rarer again is sort of a silvery grey, which is perhaps what I've inadvertently drawn in the background here. Okay, so okay, so I'm picking up some of the very pale orange that I put down towards the end of the sky painting, and I've just mixed in some white with that, but not enough. So a bit more white. Yep. So that's worked fairly well so far. So the question now is, what do I want to do in terms of highlights for this animal here? So I think what I'm going to do is, because I've got magenta in the sky, I'm going to mix up a fairly deep magenta-based purple. So I'm doing that with the magenta and some cobalt blue, but I'm going to put more of the cobalt blue in than the magenta. And the idea of this is that because the animal is very dark in color, the highlights will be very subdued. So, but they'll have a hint of something of the color of the sky. So we'll see how this goes, because it's always a little bit of an experiment. But I've just sprayed some water onto the surface of the painting, because I don't want these highlights to be too hard edged. So I want them to be fairly soft and subtle. I deliberately drag some of that over there into the white. But yes, I quite like that color. On the black. I'm not sure how well that's going to come across on camera, but here I'm really quite happy with how that's looking. Now, the
We'll use some of that same color on this animal as well. You get a bit of water on the surface of that one. And I actually think this color could be a pretty good shadow color for the world that I've created. So we'll put some of that in there. And I'm going to go darker gray for the rear leg. That one. Maybe there. I think that works reasonably well. I need to put some paler highlights on the white stripe of the one in the background. So just tap a little bit of white in across there to create a bit of texture. And we'll pick up some pure white as well. And while the surface of the paper is still wet there on the animal, so I'm happy with these two. I think I need to think about the shape of this one. Somehow I think it may have got a little distorted. So I may come back in and adjust that at a later date. But for now, what I want to do is grab another one of my very fine pointed brushes and put in some highlights on this foreground animal. So I'm going to go touch of the orange and a good chunk of the titanium white. Get a bit of water in the paint.
And yeah, I think for the moment I need to just leave that as it is because it needs to dry back completely. And then I'll be able to assess what needs to be done. But so far, so good. I'm fairly happy with that. I like the color combos, and it's fairly dramatic. And also, it's probably looking a bit distorted on camera because of the buckling of the paper. But yeah, okay, I think I'm going to leave that one there. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back soon.